The wind smelled like rust and rain, though the sky hadn't cracked in weeks. Dust rolled lazy down Main Street, catching in the wooden teeth of the broken station sign. Behind it, the rails shimmered silver and strange in the early light, empty as always. Nothing came to this town anymore, and yet smoke hung in the air. Marshal Eli Boone stood on the depot platform, hand resting near the butt of his Colt, though no threat showed itself. He squinted at the scorched earth beside the tracks. Black soot, still warm. A heel print, small, boot size, but narrow. And in the middle of it all, a child sat on the bench, back straight, eyes wide but unreadable. No one had seen the train come. The boy looked about 11, dust-caked, with hair long and tangled over his shoulders, skin sun-bitten, blood crusted on his hands and shirt, dried to rust. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, even as the marshal approached slow and heavy-footed. His gaze followed Boone like a dog, studying a stranger too close to the gate. There was no ticket, no note, just that iron box beside him, military issue, beaten but sealed. The latch looked welded shut. Eli had seen dozens just like it, 2 decades past, when war gave men medals for killing. His gut twisted. He took off his hat and crouched low. "Son," he said softly, "you with someone?" No answer. The boy's lips were cracked but closed. He blinked slow once. A fly settled on the blood at his temple. He didn't brush it away. Eli looked over his shoulder. The town was beginning to stir. A door creaked open across the street. From the faded windows of the saloon, a sliver of lantern light flickered. Eli knew who'd be behind it. Mercy 10 stepped out a minute later, apron tied over her nightgown, rifle resting easy in one hand. Her eyes swept the platform. When they landed on the boy, something shifted in her face, something like recognition or memory or pain she didn't want to name. She crossed the tracks barefoot, dust rising around her ankles like smoke. She didn't speak until she was beside Boone. He say anything? Not a word. "That box is—" He hasn't let it out of arm's reach. She squatted, arms over her knees, and looked the boy full in the face. "What's your name?" Still nothing. Mercy exhaled through her nose. Hell, could be deaf, could be just smarter than all of us. "He came off a train," Boone said low. "We didn't hear it. We didn't see it." Mercy's gaze flicked to the soot trail and back. Ghost train. Something like it. They stood in silence as the boy stared past them toward the hills. The wind pulled his hair sideways, revealing the fine line of an old scar above his ear. Mercy noticed it too. She straightened. "I'll fetch water," she said. "Boy looks half dead. Make it 2 cups." Boone sat on the bench, careful to leave space. The iron box rested between him and the child, its surface dulled by grime and use. The latch bore the letters U.S, carved deep into the metal, half filled with dirt. He remembered those boxes holding rifles, documents, sometimes bones. Footsteps approached behind him, slower, measured. Eli didn't have to turn. "Father Josiah," he said. The blind preacher paused just beyond the edge of the platform, staff tapping once before him. "I smelled iron and fire," Josiah said. His voice was dry as aged leather. "Did the train come in the night?" No one saw it. Josiah turned his face to the boy. His pupils were pale but unclouded. "I dreamed of a boy walking across smoke, carrying a dead man's voice in a box." His chin tilted. "And now you say a train left no tracks. Dreams don't concern the law." Josiah's lips pulled into something between a smile and a wince. "No, but they concern the land. And the land is uneasy." Boone didn't answer. His fingers rested on the brim of his hat, eyes drawn again to the boy. The child hadn't moved. Even now, he looked carved from wood. But something shifted in him when Mercy returned. He blinked. He reached barely for the tin cup she offered. He drank. She knelt beside him again. "You hurt?" He didn't answer, but his eyes flicked to the box. Then to Boone. Then back again. "You brought it," Boone said. The boy lowered his gaze. "What's inside?" Silence. Boone's voice roughened. "That box has a history. I don't know which part of mine it's about to wake up, Josiah's staff tapped once. You can bury a thing, Marshal, but you can't pretend it didn't live. Boone looked away. The sun had begun to crest over the ridge, bleeding red across the rooftops. Behind him, more townsfolk had gathered, leaning out of doors, whispering behind callous hands. They saw a boy in a box and a marshal whose face looked like it had aged 10 years in one dawn. Inside the saloon, Mercy poured water into a basin and rinsed the boy's hands, scrubbing off the blood and dirt. He didn't resist, but when her fingers grazed the skin beneath, she paused. There were scars, old ones, not whiplashes, not accident marks. Lines burned deliberate into the skin. Branding. Mercy looked up slowly, her breath tight. Boone saw the change in her. I've seen those marks before, she said. Years back, on runaways from Fort James. Boone's jaw worked silently. His hand dropped to the revolver at his hip, not to draw it, just to feel the weight. His voice dropped. You think this boy escaped? Mercy shook her head. No, I think someone let him go. A noise snapped from the far end of town. A crash, then a yelp. The crowd turned, head swiveling toward the church. A figure stumbled from behind it, a drunk named Heller, eyes wide, sure half open. They came, he shouted. They came last night. I saw the lights. I saw the fire. Boone stepped down from the platform fast, boots thudding on hard-packed dirt. What fire? Heller was crying. They didn't stop. No whistle. No crew. Just fire and wheels and the sound, my God, the sound. The marshal grabbed him by the shoulders. What sound, Heller? But before the drunk could answer, a gunshot cracked through the morning air. It echoed hard, close. The boy on the bench flinched for the first time. Boone spun, heart jolting. Smoke curled from the corner of the general store roof, and above it, the silhouette of a man disappeared into the rafters, rifle glinting once in the sun. Mercy ran to the boy, throwing herself between him and the direction of the shot. Someone tried to kill him, she said, voice cold. Boone's face turned to stone. He looked at the boy, the box, and the mark on the boy's hand, now scrubbed clean enough to show a faint tattoo, a number, military issue, classified personnel. Boone turned toward the townsfolk, his voice sharp and carrying. Get inside. All of you. This town's about to remember something it tried to forget. The boy looked up at him then. Just a second. And in that second, Boone saw it in his eyes. The boy knew him, had come for him, and he wasn't alone. The train might have left at dawn, but something had stayed behind. Eli Boone sat alone that night in the jailhouse, lamp burning low, rifle across his knees. The station was locked. The boy asleep in Mercy's spare room upstairs. But the iron box was here with him, resting heavy on the desk like it had grown roots into the wood. He hadn't touched it since the shot rang out, but he hadn't looked away either. He knew what those boxes carried. Not just bullets and orders. Sometimes truth. Sometimes punishment wrapped in velvet and sealed with wax. And once, for him, a letter with a metal that meant nothing and a silence that meant everything. He poured a finger of whiskey into a tin cup and stared at the box like it might confess first. The boy's face kept rising in his mind. The way he didn't cry when the bullet cracked. The way he stared when Boone barked orders. That look, it wasn't fear. It was judgment, like a ghost that had learned how to watch. The door creaked open slow. Mercy stepped inside, her coat wet from the drizzle that had started after sundown. Her hair was tied up in a red kerchief, and her boots tracked in mud. He's asleep, she said. Boone nodded. Thank you. She walked over to the desk, eyes falling to the box. Her fingers didn't reach for it. Did you open it? Not yet. What are you waiting for? I don't know. She sat opposite him. The room crackled with silence. Just the hiss of the lantern, the low groan of the floorboards under their chairs. Mercy looked older in the soft light, tired in a way Boone hadn't seen before. I saw a mark, she said finally, on the boy's shoulder. Faint but still there. Boone waited. It was an old cavalry brand. They used a tattoo or burn it in, depending how far off the books it was. My brother had one. After Yuma. Boone's throat tightened. And the number? Mercy met his eyes. Classified unit. Not supposed to exist anymore. He exhaled. The whiskey tasted worse now. I think, Mercy said slowly, he was born at Fort James. Or near it. Not raised, exactly. Not free, either. Boone rubbed a calloused hand across his face. The memories came sharper now. Cavalry barracks. Screaming. Fire. The smell of wet canvas and singed flesh. A woman crawling from a burning lodge, arms outstretched, shielding a baby. He'd aimed at the child once. Cold. Ordered to clear the village. He remembered the sound of the hammer clicking back. Then something had stopped him. He left the child there. Walked away. I thought he'd died, Boone said. Mercy was very still. You know it's him. I do now. Outside, a door slammed against the wind. Hooves clattered down the muddy street. Someone rode too fast, too hard. A knock followed, sharp and urgent. Boone grabbed his rifle. A breath later, Father Josiah stepped through the door, shoulders soaked, cane tapping. His voice was strained. Come to the church, he said. Now. They found a body in the bell tower. The drunk Heller, dangling from a rope, swaying in the rain, face swollen, eyes bulged. His fingers had been snapped backward one by one. There was blood on the floor beneath him, not from a hanging, from the torture. Mercy stared at the ceiling, while Boone cut the rope. The corpse hit the ground like a bag of wet grain. No one heard this? Boone asked. Josiah shook his head. No screams. Just silence. Mercy turned to Boone. He said he saw the train come. Boone crouched by the body, pulled something from the dead man's shirt pocket, a piece of black cloth, folded once. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single feather, white at the tip, the rest stained red. Mercy stepped back. That's a war sign. Apache? She nodded, but twisted. White tip means lost one. Red-blooded end means vengeance returned. Boone stood slowly. The air inside the church felt colder than the rain outside. The boy hadn't brought death. He was carrying it, escorting it like a duty. By dawn, the town knew. Heller was buried before the sun was up. Closed casket. The church door stayed shut. Windows nailed. Whispers grew faster than the morning light. Boone walked the streets like a man on trial. Some faces nodded, others looked away. They knew he'd served. They didn't know what he'd done. He returned to Mercy Saloon as the town blinked into life. Upstairs, the boy was awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at a page Mercy had given him. He'd drawn something. Eli knelt beside him, looked at the page. It was a map of the town, the rails, the church, the station, and a mark, X, right over the marsh east of town. Is that where the train stopped? Eli asked softly. The boy looked up at him, then slowly pressed one finger to Eli's chest. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was memory. That night, Eli took the iron box into the jail and shut the door. No one else. No Mercy. No Josiah. Just him. He lit the second lamp, set his gun on the table, touched the lid. The latch was rusted but not locked. With a slow breath, he lifted the lid. Inside were bones, wrapped in faded cavalry cloth, a rusted saber, and something smaller, a medal, still pinned to a letter he hadn't seen in 20 years. The name on it was his, but the commendation listed valor for a mission he didn't finish, a mission where the real hero had been his commanding officer, a man who ordered the slaughter, then died when the horses stampeded, breaking ranks. Eli had left that part out, let them write the tale the way they wanted, and now that officer's bones had been returned. In Eli's box, he sat back, shoulders trembling. The boy hadn't come to find shelter. He'd come to return a legacy, one that Eli never asked for, one he never deserved. In the morning, Mercy knocked. Eli opened the door, pale, shaken. He's gone, she said. Boone stepped outside. The boy's bed was empty, his blanket folded, the drawing left behind. Only one change had been made. A red line now connected the X to the church, and beside it, in charcoal scratches, One word had been added. Tomorrow. The storm rolled in without thunder, just a low hum beneath the earth, like something ancient stirring in its sleep. By the time the noon bell rang hollow from the shuttered church, the sky had turned the color of old lead, and the boy had not returned. Eli Boone stood by the station ruins, boots sunk in wet clay, staring east where the marsh met the tree-line. He held the boy's map in his left hand. The red line bled toward the X, and from the X of the church, as if connecting sins by thread. Mercy joined him, hair pulled tight beneath her hat, her coat stiff with rain. She said nothing for a long time. "You believe it's real?" she asked finally. Boone didn't answer. "Ghost train. Vanishing boy. That box." "He's not a ghost," Boone said. "He's a reckoning." Mercy watched him. "You want to tell me what happened out there? The night you earned that medal." Boone's jaw clenched. Rain tapped on his hat brim like ticking seconds. "We were told it was a raider camp. Nothing more. Ride in, take the high ground, burn the food stores. Push them south." And Boone shook his head. There weren't raiders. There were families, children, a wedding ceremony underway. His voice dropped. The lieutenant wanted proof of aggression, so he made it, had us fire into the crowd, claimed we found weapons, planted after, said we saved the valley. And the child. "I found him after," Boone said, "under his mother. She'd been shot 3 times. He wasn't crying, just watching. I aimed, his voice broke. Then I lowered the rifle and walked away." He folded the map, but it didn't feel smaller in his hand. "Someone buried the truth in that box," Mercy said. Boone looked at her, eyes bloodshot. He dug it up and brought it back. The townsfolk were changing. You could feel it. Doors bolted tighter. Eyes narrowed through curtains. There were whispers of riding to Fort James, asking for help, or worse, for intervention. At dusk, Father Josiah stood outside the saloon, his face turned to the wind. "He's waiting," Josiah said. "Out there where you left him." Boone nodded. "I'll ride." "I'll go with you," Mercy said. Boone shook his head. "If I'm not back by dawn, bury that box." He saddled his mare in silence. No weapons but the rifle and the old saber from the iron chest. The medal he pinned to his coat, not for pride, but for offering. By twilight, he reached the marsh. The water sat still as glass, trees crooked like fingers reaching from amok. And there, standing in the reeds, was the boy. He faced Boone without surprise, as if he'd been waiting every year since the day the gun was lowered. "I'm here," Boone said. The boy said nothing. He stepped aside. Behind him, in the shadows of the trees, more figures emerged, silent, steady, shrouded in cloth. 12, maybe more, all wearing fragments of old uniforms. Stained blue coats, Apache belts, cavalry boots, scars. They weren't soldiers. They weren't tribesmen. They were the forgotten, half-blood children, burned boys, lost daughters, products of war no one claimed. Boone's breath caught. He dismounted. No one moved. The boy stepped forward. From under his coat, he withdrew a faded document, folded, sealed with wax. Boone took it with shaking hands. He broke the seal. Inside, a court-martial order. Years old, never delivered. For Lieutenant Ransom. For war crimes. Signed, dated, but never enacted. Boone's name was on the witness list. "You brought this," he whispered, "to remind me." The boy nodded. The others stepped back, one by one, vanishing into the swamp mist. Only the boy remained. Boone dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wasn't brave then." The boy reached forward, placed something in Boone's hand. A single round. Spent. Fired long ago. Boone closed his fingers around it. Rain began to fall. They returned to town just before midnight. The streets were empty, but not still. Smoke drifted from the church. Boone galloped ahead, dismounted before the doors, shoved them open. Inside, torches had been lit, and in the center of the altar, nailed to the wood, was a second feather, red-tipped white base. Beneath it, A scrap of paper with one word. Judge. The box had been taken. Mercy stood by the pews, blood at her temple. Soldiers, she gasped. From the fort, 4 men. Took the box. Asked for the boy. I refused. Boone steadied her. Where? They're holed up at the rail yard, waiting for dawn. They said a train is coming. Boone turned to the boy, who stood behind him, wet and still. He asked a question without words. The boy nodded once. The train was real, and it was coming again, not to bring anything, but to take it away. Boone touched the medal still pinned to his chest. Then I ride one last time, he said. The boy reached for the saber on Boone's saddle. Together, they walked into the storm. The rail yard groaned under the weight of storm wind and ghosts. Rusted tracks hissed with rain, and the skeletal station ruins stood like gallows in silhouette. Eli Boone walked beside the boy, each step slow, deliberate, boots striking iron and water alike. The saber hung from Boone's belt, its handle cold against his thigh. The child carried no weapon, only the burden of memory, and something older than vengeance. They saw the soldiers before they were seen. For men in Fort James Blue, rifles slung, oilskin coats soaked through. They'd taken shelter inside the storage depot, windows blacked, lantern light flickering behind warped glass. The iron box sat just beyond the doors, perched atop an overturned crate like a shrine. Its lid had been reopened. Boone could see the metal gleaming even from a distance. He whispered to the boy, "Wait here." The boy didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the soldiers as if they were echoes. Boone approached alone, unarmed in hand. Soaked to the bone. One of the soldiers stepped out. Young, clean-shaven. Too proud to understand fear yet. His rifle was steady. That's far enough. Boone didn't stop. "Lieutenant among you?" The soldier hesitated. Then a second man appeared behind him. Older, cold-eyed, face sharp as a blade. He wore no insignia, but Boone recognized the way he stood. Authority without question. "I'm speaking to a man who ordered a dead child back to Fort James in a box," Boone said. "That about you?" The lieutenant stared. "You're Boone." Boone nodded. "The boy belongs to no one. Let him go." "He's not a boy. He's evidence. And that box belongs to the U.S. military." Boone's voice hardened. "You trying to erase a crime or make a new one?" The lieutenant's face darkened. "Step away, Marshal." "I'm not the marshal tonight." Behind Boone, thunder cracked like God striking flint. Lightning burned the clouds bone white. And for a breathless second, the boy stood illuminated at the edge of the yard, unmoving, water dripping from his coat like blood. The lieutenant turned. The soldiers raised rifles. Then the whistle blew, but not from them. From the west, where the tracks had been long abandoned, a sound cut through wind and rain, high and sharp, metallic and mournful. A train whistle. The men froze. Boone's heart thudded. He turned. Lights. Headlamps broke the dark, distant at first, then growing. A train, black as sin, engine hissing. Wheels grinding on tracks no one had seen repaired. No crew visible. No flag waving. Just speed. The soldiers panicked. One fired at the boy. The shot missed wide. Boone drew. The saber flashed, catching the nearest man in the leg. He dropped screaming. The lieutenant fired back. Boone ducked, rolled, came up behind a crate. His side burned where a bullet grazed him, but he didn't stop. The storm roared louder now, rain falling sideways, soaking powder and sight alike. The boy never moved. The train howled louder. The second soldier charged Boone with a bayonet. Boone parried with a saber, twisted, and drove the hilt into the man's throat. He fell gasping, water choking him before blood did. One remained, rifle aimed directly at the boy. Boone shouted. The shot cracked, but a second report overlapped it. The shooter's head jerked. He fell lifeless. Behind him stood Mercy Tan, smoking rifle in hand, eyes locked on the boy. Her lip was split. One boot was missing, but she had come. The lieutenant backed toward the iron box, soaked, wild-eyed. "You don't know what you're protecting," he screamed. "He's not a victim. He's a message." "I know," Boone said, stepping forward, blade low, And I heard it. The train screeched, brakes squealing like banshees. It reached the yard and stopped. No steam rose. No engineer stepped out. The doors slid open. Inside, nothing but shadows and seats long empty. The boy approached the box. The lieutenant raised a pistol. Boone lunged. The saber struck the lieutenant's arm. Gun flew. The man fell to his knees, shrieking, blood washing down his coat. The boy lifted the iron box. Too heavy for someone so small, but he did not stagger. He turned to Boone, nodded once. Boone stepped back. The boy carried the box up the steps of the train. Each movement echoed like thunder. He entered the car. Doors closed behind him. No conductor. No steam. Just silence. Then the whistle blew again. A single, long note, and the train began to move. No sparks. No shaking. It simply pulled away. Into the mist. Into the night. Into whatever waited. Boone dropped the saber. Rain streamed over his face, mixing with tears he hadn't let fall in 20 years. Mercy stepped beside him. "Is it done?" Boone nodded. He finished what he couldn't. The storm began to ease. Lightning faded. Rain softened. Boone looked to the tracks. The train was gone. No sign it had ever come. But the mud held one thing behind, pressed into the earth where the box had rested. A single feather, white-tipped and clean. By morning, the sun rose quiet over the town. The church bell rang, not for death, but for breath. Windows opened. Doors creaked. Folks walked the streets not asking what happened, but somehow knowing. Eli Boone stood outside the jail, watching the sky. He had no badge now, no rank, just a scar across his side and peace inside his chest. Mercy brought coffee, sat beside him. "What now?" she asked. He looked at the rails. "They'll ask why the train didn't stop." She smiled faintly. No one saw it arrive. Boone nodded, but we saw it leave. And that was enough.